Knitting Daily has been sponsored in part by Interweave, your craft community for books, magazines, videos, patterns, events, and more. On the web at interweavestore.com.
So let's get started by looking at some twisted stitch knitting. I brought some samples along with me, and if you look over here, you can see that this range of techniques can produce patterns that go all the way from very geometric, kind of abstract line patterns, all the way over to more floral or sort of patterns that are reminiscent of something or a little bit more pictorial in nature. But what this technique always lends is this kind of very distinct, sort of high relief kind of carved texture almost. Basically twisted stitches are like miniature cables. They're just one stitch wide cables. But because they're twisted through the back loop of each stitch, hence twisted stitch knitting, you get this really, really great stitch definition that just pops right up off the surface of the fabric. So come on in with me to take a look at my little swatch that I've been knitting here. And this is a very traditional kind of twisted stitch lattice texture. We've got lines that go this way and lines that go this way, and they cross over and under each other at predetermined intervals. Now, twisted stitches are basically just tiny cables, right? And you can knit them as tiny cables using a cable needle to rearrange your stitches just as you would for a cable. You're just moving one stitch at a time. But because it's just one stitch at a time, you can use a couple of other techniques to streamline the knitting process a little bit. I'm at a point where my next two stitches are knit stitches, and I'm going to cross them so that the first stitch on the needle crosses over the second stitch on the needle. So the first stitch will become the second stitch and vice versa. Now I can accomplish that by simply knitting them out of order. Since this stitch in the back is going to become the first stitch, I could knit that first. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Because this second stitch is going to be behind the first stitch that's currently on my needle, I'm going to take my right needle behind the first stitch. Now I'm kind of going to work it out to the front here so you can see that it's between those two stitches. Now I'm going to insert it into the back leg of that second stitch. And I'm just going to really open that up for you to make sure that you can see. These are twisted stitches, so I'm going into the back leg of every single knit stitch. I've got my needle in, I'm going to wrap my yarn and pull it through. Now I'm going to go ahead and knit the first stitch, again through the back loop because these are all twisted stitches. Now I'm going to slide them both off the needle. You can see that they've kind of rearranged themselves already. The second stitch has crossed underneath the back stitch. Now I've got two purl stitches. I'm just going to purl those as normal. And I've got that same situation again where I want to cross my first stitch over, going to the left, my second stitch on my needle. I'm going to show you a different technique that achieves the exact same result, but it's just a slightly different way of going about it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slip both stitches purlwise to my right hand needle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my left hand needle to the front of my work. I'm going to just skip over this first stitch on my right hand needle, and I'm going to insert it into the front leg of my second stitch on my right needle. Now I'm going to pull my right needle out of both of those stitches. The second stitch is caught onto my left needle, so it's anchored, but that back stitch is hanging free for a moment. So real quickly, I'm just going to slip my right needle right back into it. So now you can see that they've already been crossed. I'm going to put that stitch right back onto the left-hand needle, and I'm going to go ahead and knit them through the back loop. So in the first case, I actually worked the stitches out of order. In the second case, I reordered them before I worked them. Now I'm going to work my last two purl stitches. Now this is a quick tip. I've got a bunch of yarn floats on the back of my piece, and the reason for that is because twisted stitch patterns are often worked in the round. It's because they have twisted stitches and stitches that are moving. They're either traveling or they're crossing over each other on every single round, and it's a little bit awkward to work those on the wrong side of the work. So most twisted stitch garments, all the ones that you see here, are worked in the round. Now I didn't want to work a giant tube of knitting, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm working on double pointed needles, and I'm just going to slide my work to the other end of my needle, and I'm just going to bring a float of yarn around. This is a really handy trick to know for any time that you need to work a circular swatch, but you don't want to work a 16-inch length or whatever the smallest length of your circular needles is. So now I'm just going to start working again. I'm starting with 2 purl stitches. I'm going to move my yarn to the back of the work. And I'm sorry, that second purl stitch is actually part of this grouping. This knit stitch is now going to move over this purl stitch, moving towards the right. So I'm just going to insert my needle into the back of that stitch. And now I'm going to move my yarn to the front, and I'm going to purl that stitch. Oops. Now I'm going to slip both stitches off, and again they've been reordered. So you have a bunch of different choices for working your stitches either out of order or reordering them first and then working them. But twisted stitch patterns are a lot easier than you think.